this is a good case. I had this one saved away, and I wasn't even sure if I had covered it already. And I think there is a chance. Let me just pop this up as a timestamp divider. I think that I did a clip of her. We're going to be going over Karen Thomas's NDE. It's quite an array of stuff. So it covers a lot of data points compacted into one case. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this one. I highly recommend sticking around for it. And so let's get into it. I'm not going to do too much of an intro on it, but an interesting thing she said, as you can see in the thumbnail, is, I don't know who it is, but it's not Jesus. She doesn't say it like that, but it's interesting. And of course, she had preconceived notions about what to expect, and given her background, and so that is what dictated her near-death experience, which obviously you'll see. So, all right, just bear with me one moment here while I get this set up. Okay, I had it up. Now I lost my place. Okay. All right, so I did have to skip like the first 20 seconds, which was mostly music, but basically the first few words you may miss are she's talking about her childhood. So that's all you're going to miss.
When I was only 7, my father and my mother and I were out in a boat, a fishing boat, and my father had a heart attack and passed away. That was a very traumatic experience for me as a young child. I had prayed that he would live, and he didn't. And so I was always, it seems like, seeking God and seeking to find out why, when I prayed, my father hadn't lived, why my life had changed so radically after I lost him. So that was an important part of my childhood. And it also was still going on after I married and had 2 children. I had become a physical therapist. My husband and I had moved from upstate New York, where we both had grown up in a small town, and we went to Alaska. And so when I had my near-death experience, I was going through a big change of faith, I guess you could say. We had started going to a new church. I had been seeking to feel as though I really would be able to go to heaven someday. And I had thought of myself as being a born-again Christian. I was introduced to the concept of baptism in the Holy Spirit as a sign of someone who was going to be accepted and go on to heaven, that it was a validation. But at the same time, I was injured at my job as a physical therapist.
So as you can see, she has, like we were talking about in the beginning, preconceived notions already about what's going on, what to expect.
Was injured at my job as a physical therapist. I had already had 1 back surgery 5 years prior to that. And so it was a situation where I may have to no longer be able to work as a physical therapist if I had to have a spinal fusion done. And the doctors couldn't tell me for certain whether that was going to be the case or not. So my near-death experience happened when I was having that surgery done at the same hospital where I worked. My husband and my 2 children, who were 9 and 6 at the time, had come to the hospital with me and had been sent to a waiting room while I was taken into surgery. I was, of course, under anesthesia. I had been placed on my stomach so they could reopen my back. But while I was under anesthesia, suddenly my consciousness was out of my body and was up in a corner of the operating room. focused on ceiling tiles that were just a few inches away from my vision. But noise in the operating room of the surgeon swearing at a nurse and sending the nurse to get blood transfusion, and the ruckus of what was going on in there drew my attention back in time to see my body being turned from on my face to being face up, and realizing that that was me, and that therefore, since I was seeing my body but not in my body, that I must be dead. So in alarm, my first thoughts were, I have to get to my husband and to my kids. Somehow I have to be able to communicate to them that the essence of me is okay. I'm all right. Yes, I'm dead, but I'm okay. But they aren't going to be. I need to get to them. So as I'm thinking these thoughts, although I felt kind of calm and removed from my physical body, I was, because of my concern, wanting to get to my husband and to my kids, and my consciousness began drifting literally through the wall of the OR, retracing the steps that my stretcher had brought me to the OR, and out into the hallway, and got to an open door of an elevator, and a telepathic voice said to me, "Pay attention to this man." And so my attention was drawn to a man in regular street clothes who was rushing back in the direction that I had just come from. And as I looked at him, I'm a nearsighted person who can't see without my glasses, but not only could I see him very clearly, but I actually was able to zoom in and see, this is what his hair color is, this is what his eye color is, these are the clothes he's wearing, this is everything kind of magnified about him. And also to be able to hear his thoughts. And I heard his thoughts that he needed to get in there fast. And as he is thinking this, I also picked up the thoughts of another man who was down near the OR entrance, who was looking at this man and was thinking, what does this guy think he's doing? He can't go into the operating room area. He's not allowed. Yet, as I watched the intertake that was going on there, the man I was supposed to pay attention to paused for a bit, and then electronic doors, double doors opened, and then he rushed on through. And as soon as that took place, my mind was back into thinking about the waiting room and trying to get to my husband and kids. And so I began to think again of going where I thought the waiting room might be, but I stopped being able to control my motion of where my consciousness was going, and I began to be drawn upward through the ceiling of the floor that I was on, up into the following floor, and continued up through floors until I was out the whole roof of the hospital and up into the sky at about the level of a small plane, and then was drawn over the city of Anchorage, which was where the hospital was located. And as I'm going over the city of Anchorage and not feeling any resistance to any of my movement, but I'm going faster and faster, I reached the water's edge, and a dark tunnel, cave-like opening opened up, and I was drawn into it. And once I was inside, I began moving extremely fast.
Okay, so an interesting part is where she feels the need to let her husband know what's going on. And she's like, the case kind of has a little bit of a similarity, not necessarily the same, but the one case that really always blows me away is the man who got struck by lightning, and we laugh all the time about how there just happened to be a lightning strike expert right nearby. He got struck by lightning when he was using a payphone, and he kind of like was just hovering around the area doing his own thing. And then it was like up the stairs a little bit, there was this orb, right? So I don't know, like it's like you see this sometimes in NDEs, especially in the hospital, where they'll go through the walls or try to find the waiting room, try to find where their husband or wife or children may be waiting for them. And of course, the family can't hear them. But yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting to hear. And, you know, here we go. This is when things start to ramp up.
Like opened up, and I was drawn into it. And once I was inside, I began moving extremely fast and began to notice that the only light I could see, it was all dark around me, was a pinprick of light way off in the distance. And the faster I went, the larger the light was becoming, until I finally burst into the light itself. And I was immediately filled with an enormous sense of love, peace, joy, bliss, and all sorts of emotions.
All right, so, you know, textbook, you know, flying down the tunnel, ends up at, you know, the lights in the distance, and boom, here comes the emotions, that the love, everything.
Joy, bliss, and all sorts of emotions. And a feeling of being, everything was all right, that I was okay, everything was okay.
Everything is okay. Now, seriously, I mean, I know we talk about this all the time, but everything's okay, right? You just came from a freaking dumpster fire realm, right? If you're running a mass deception here that is linked to the astral realm or the afterlife, let's say, or things like an NDE, right? It's in your best interest to have a equalizer, right? So that things are more easily, like, the response that someone would give and be like, you know, what the hell's going on back there? What did I just come from? You know, I want to speak to the manager. Funny enough, we're going over an NDE with the person with the name of Karen, but you know, I mean, but I want to talk to the manager. See, they defray that by emitting out all that love and the light and the, you know, the acceptance, and it everything kind of just fades away, or not even fades away, but like is not as embedded in the individual about what they just experienced, what they just came from, so that finally complete with the manager in the astral realm isn't going to be at the top of your list because you're being bombarded with this sensory overload of love. It's a hell of a freaking system. It really is. It's really well thought out.
And I looked down to see where am I, and saw brown, rocky ground, very arid, almost deserty type of a look. And as I looked down and saw no feet or anything, but saw these things, I immediately was thinking, this isn't what I would think heaven would be. Where am I? And as I thought that, again, another telepathic voice off to my left spoke, saying, follow me.
How convenient, right? Soon as she starts questioning what she's involved with, no, hold on. We're going to telepathically communicate. Come with me. Come on. So the questioning begins, and immediately something inserts itself to make sure that she is handled correctly. It's amazing.
And as I thought that, again, another telepathic voice off to my left spoke, saying, follow me. And as I heard the words, I noticed that there was a man that was climbing up a slope out of this area that I had come out into. And as I looked at him, I immediately was like right behind him, watching and also going up this slope. So I looked at him carefully, his back, and I noticed that his hair was almost black and had been pulled back and tied with a piece of leather. Clothing-wise, he had just an off-white rough garment with again a simple leather belt around the waist, and it came down about thigh length, mid-thigh length. On his legs and feet were sandals, and the sandals had ties that crisscrossed up his calves and tied under his knees. And
you smell that? Smells like a little Jesus-like.
Crossed up his calves and tied under his knees. And so, again, my thought was, this can't be heaven. If it's heaven, I should be with Jesus. And I don't know who he is, but it's not Jesus. Yet I felt like he had a kindness and a love about him, that a concern and a compassion for me. I could feel these feelings from him, but was really confused and puzzled. And as we came up out of this area, up over the slope, the whole landscape changed. And suddenly it was a totally green, lush, gorgeous looking area, grass and bright flowers, all kinds of colors that I had never seen before, trees with beautiful, lush leaves. It was mesmerizing.
So here we go again, another data point with the lush, landscape, how everything kind of just changed, right? Remember, she's questioning things, and it's like, okay, it's like they keep rolling different scenes. All right, we're not getting, it's literally the Wizard of Oz behind the freaking curtain saying, or not say, like just pulling the levers, right? Pull the levers. Okay, this one's not working. She's questioning things, which like means she's pretty damn lucid in this, because it's not aligning with what she was taught on Earth, what she believes, and she's questioning it. And so the Matrix is like, pulling all the levers it can, just throwing this amazing scenery, throwing a phony Jesus, whatever the case may be, right? I mean, you could see like the progression in this deception, right? It's incredible. It's a really amazing case.
Trees with beautiful, lush leaves. It was mesmerizing. And I noticed that this immense light that I had come into was actually within every living thing that I was looking at, inside the flowers, inside the grass, inside the trees and leaves, and emanating out.
And that's another data point. Like you hear a lot of NDEers say that, how like that this goes to the everything is connected narrative, right? Like everything is breathing and connected and living and part of everything.
And as I was fascinated with this, the man that I had followed had gone on ahead, began thinking of him as my guide. He spoke or telepathically again and again said, "Follow me." And immediately I was up behind him again. And this time he was on the bank of a river. And that's the first that I remember him actually turning toward me and looking toward me so that I was able to see his face and take it all in. And on the opposite bank of this river, I began to see deceased relatives, my father, my brother who had died in a car accident, aunts and uncles who had passed away, 4 people that weren't familiar to me as far as how they looked, but I just knew they were the 4 grandparents who had all died before I was born.
Okay, so again, incredible, right? You have deceased relatives that she's familiar with involved with this, and then some that she isn't so sure about, but they're present and she knows them, and they're across. We have the water symbology, which could potentially Like when I was hearing this, I had like I don't know, like I had a vibe of Greek mythology, right? And the River Hades. Trying to think, what's the other one? I knew I was gonna have a mind blank here on this one, but where it's like she's not ready to go, right? But the classic would be like, oh, she dies and she goes across the river, but the family is there, right? So it's almost like, hey, these are the deceased loved ones, and it's like she reached almost a certain point where she's ready to go, or the Matrix is ready to let it continue. But that was not in the cards whatsoever from the beginning, and you're going to see how that plays itself out. But interesting to see the connection with Greek quote unquote mythology.
And they were welcoming me and being just so happy to see me, so glad that I was there.
Of course, the welcoming
and
committee.
I wanted to go across this water, this beautiful, bright, glistening water, to where they were. But my guide said, no, you can't go now.
No.
We have somewhere else we have to go first.
Yeah, you got to go somewhere else first. We've got to distract you. You're not allowed to go across. You're not allowed to go see your relatives. Nope. We've got another plan for you, and it involves getting your ass back to Earth.
And since I was being drawn and not controlling where I was going, ever since I had gone upward in the hospital, I was pulled along with him as he went down around the bank of the river and into an opening that was filled with a big, beautiful building that all I could think of was Greco-Roman styling, because it was white, pearlescent white.
Incredible, right? She's seeing even the Greco-Roman architecture. She's got a Greek mythology story, a very, very typical story being played out just before this. Then she's getting the Greco-Roman style architecture on top of it, which again, all this stuff goes to something I refer to as the continuity of familiarity, right? It's things that are familiar to us that stand out, so they comfort us, make us feel better, so that we're more easily deceived when we cross over. And it's just incredible. I mean, this is just another data point. Like, it's just chock full with them.
Glowing from inside like everything else was. And I also saw other spiritual people there. And they were going up this long line of stairs that went up to where columns were beside the doorway, and others that were down in the open area around the building. My guide went on ahead up to the entrance doors and said to me, "Follow me." And so I followed him into the building itself. And
so remember, they're saying, "Follow me." Keep consenting, keep going along with the show. Not like she wasn't going to, but they're asking.
And so I followed him into the building itself. And as we went in, it appeared as though it were an enormous library. It had a very long open area that was filled with tables, and on either side, up as high as you could see, on either side were all kinds of books and old scrolls. My guide communicated to me, this is where the books of life are stored, but we are going to another area. Follow me. And we went through this entire area and into a hallway area toward the back, and then into a room in which a whole group of spiritual beings were around what you would almost think of like a conference table. And so my guide spoke again, and said, "We're going to look at your life and everything that has happened up until this time." And as he said it, it was as though a hologram appeared in the center of this conference table. And prior to that coming up, it had looked actually clear and almost like a glass-bottom boat rather than a table. But once that came up, it began showing everything that had happened throughout my life. And I began feeling as though I was reliving it all over again. Not just my own feelings and experience of it, but also being able to feel the person that I was interacting with and feel as though I were that other person.
So, textbook life review scenario here. Very interesting, right? But it's different. Like, she's looking through the bottom of a glass boat. I find it fascinating that those are the terms she uses. Now, one of the common things we see in NDEs is individuals being kind of jockeyed to look down, and that's usually in relation to them coming back here, right? So, I mean, she obviously comes back here. You'll see how it plays out, but I find it interesting. Like, it's like she's saying it in this term, and then it's just a little different than others. And then we even hear an open admission of a hologram, right? Which could easily be a deception, right? I mean, it's all spelled out. It seems like she was having questions not every step of the way, but at least a few steps of the way. And so the Matrix was adjusting accordingly, and it kind of went into some similar programming that resembles pretty much everything we see all the time, but with a little twist. Again, the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain.
In places where I had misunderstood or been unkind to someone else, I felt the anger or the hurt that they were feeling, and I saw the ripple effect that it had when they went out and then carried those feelings and turned them into actions that were negative against other people. And on the contrary side, when I had said and done things that were kind, I was feeling how important that was and how good that was when I was feeling being the other person. And again saw the ripple effect that came out from them being able to take that same kind treatment and pass it on to other people. So it was an amazing experience, and I felt bad for things that I felt I could have done better, but all of the spiritual people who were there only radiated love and understanding to me and no sense of judgment whatever.
I remember I felt I could have done things better. See, this is where the problem comes in. I felt like I could have done things better, but if she's to do things better and didn't, even though they're not quote unquote judging her, even though they are, even though there's like a clear system in play that is literally based on judgment and shaming, and it's to the extent of putting someone inside the experience of the individual that they offended. And you know what? It would be different if this realm didn't involve being memory wiped, didn't involve coming here lifetime after lifetime, not knowing where you came from, where you're going, or why you were here, right? It would be different if those things, if the memory wipe wasn't on the table with all this. But it is. It's a fact. It's happening. And so if she didn't do good, if she didn't achieve whatever you're supposed to do, or didn't treat whoever the best, does that mean that she's doomed to keep reincarnating here to do better next time? And the answer is seemingly yes. That's what seems to be happening. We're all coming here lifetime after lifetime, going through this experience and being memory wiped every time and not knowing what we need to work on. if reincarnation was designed to have us work and right our wrongs, that would be different. But that's not what's happening. Clearly, that's not what's happening because nobody freaking knows. Nobody knows. But yet the data shows us that that's exactly what's being presented to us. So if that's what the data is saying, overwhelmingly saying that, yes, we need to come here lifetime after lifetime and continue to work on ourselves and evolve and ascend and right our wrongs and fix our karma and blah, blah, blah. Well, if you come to a place and you have no clue what the hell's going on and what you need to work on, then how can you fix it? How can you fix it? See, the facts of what's being presented, the data points, don't align with any sort of common sense. There's absolutely no excuse for anyone to be memory wiped when they come here if everything is based around karma and judgment and sinning, even though there's, as she says, no judgment, which time after time after time after time, we hear this from NDEers, but that's exactly what's happening. It's shame and guilt being put upon her based on actions she did in her most recent incarnation. See, this is like everything falls apart. It does not make any sense. So that's why the path to liberation is through sovereignty and non-interference. That's it. So that we're not going to involve ourselves with any of these things ever again. We're going to say, no, I'm not doing your stinking life review. Actually, no, you're not even going to interact with anything that's going to make that even a possibility. But it's time for us to stand up for ourselves. That's the bottom line.
I felt I could have done better, but all of the spiritual people who were there only radiated love and understanding to me and no sense of judgment, whatever. And I got the feeling that I should know who these beings were. I felt as though they had helped me plan my life before I was ever born. They knew all of what I had hoped to accomplish in my life. And they then said, you can go back to your life or you can stay here. But before you decide, we want to show you things that will happen if you go back to your life, or some things that may happen or may not, depending on another person's free will choices that could alter what we're going to show you here, because everyone has free will. And at this point, I know something else happened, but I have never been able to remember what, because the next thing that I recall is being in a totally different, smaller room with my guide. And he said to me that he wanted to show me the prayers that I had asked people to pray for me, that I would not lose my career and that I would not have to have the spinal fusion. And so he showed me off to the right, and I saw what looked like musical notes. And if you look at a score of music and you see the dark notes and the whole notes, and I saw these notes, but they were connecting one to another, going upward rather than like across a sheet of paper. And my guide said that each one of those notes represented a different prayer, and that every prayer has its own unique vibration. And as these prayers kept coming up closer to me, my guide said, I also want to show you what's happening in the hospital. And as he said that, it was as though I could see through a ceiling into the room where my husband and the kids had been waiting for me.
All right, so this is when the Matrix makes the oh so holy pivot, right? It's like, okay, Karen, we've had enough of you, right? It's time to get back to business. You're not staying here, right? You're going back to Earth, And you've been following us the whole time. And again, Karen, if you happen to ever run across this, I mean no ill will towards yourself or anyone else listening or any other experience you're covered on this channel. The point is this is the pivot moment where we see in NDE after NDE after NDE when it's like, okay, you know, you've had your fun. We've shown you the meadow. You know, we've shown you the fake Jesus and the hologram and you know, in her case, the library or whatever, right? We've shown you all this stuff, but it's time to concentrate back down on Earth. You know, and what that does is it just is like a one-way ticket back here. So very textbook type of response and result, unfortunately.
And I also saw my husband standing in a doorway to this small room.
Of course.
And the doctor who had operated on me standing in his surgical clothes, speaking to my husband. And behind them, where my children were, I saw my daughter. I felt that she had been so scared that I was dying. And so she, along with the other prayers, prayed that I would live. And when she did pray that, my guide allowed me to feel all of my emotions of being her mother, of being my husband's wife, of being my son's mother, of being Karen, and feeling that I had to go back because I couldn't allow this to happen if I...
The feeling that I had to go back because I could not allow it to happen. Well, where is that coming from, right? Remember, who helped the pivot start in the first place for Karen? It was the Matrix. Had nothing to do with Karen. Had everything to do with who she was interacting with. Who she decided to continue to interact with. That's so important to take away from this here.
Of being my husband's wife, of being my son's mother, of being Karen, and feeling that I had to go back because I couldn't allow this to happen if I had a choice. So I did choose to go back to my life. And before I left, my God...
Look, she chose, but she was deceived into choosing, right? We've seen this time and time and time again, how they are distracted back to their life on Earth, usually involving family members, the pets, the friends. I know I bring up this case up a lot, but it's a really important one. There's that one case I talked about, and I'm sorry I can't remember the name of it, but where they literally went through a laundry list of family before she was like, no, it'll be all right. For instance, this is what I recall off the top of my head. It was something like, it was a woman who was having the experience, and she had a couple children, a husband, and I think a living mother, right? And it's like, oh, the kids will be fine. You know, like the Matrix shows the children. Like, oh, what about your children? Oh, no, the children will be fine. And then, oh, what about your husband? No, my husband will be fine. My husband will be able to watch his kids. Everything will be fine. But then they roll out the mother. What about your mother? Behind door number 3. And behind door number 3, mom has cancer. And that's exactly what the Matrix needed to get them to agree to go back. Right? It was like it was rolling out all of the options, and it was like fail, 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 success. And it was literally running like a program. I mean, it's incredible. But, you know, it's no different. It's no different what we're seeing here today.
If I had a choice. So I did choose to go back to my life. And before I left, my guide said, you will be able to have proof of everything that has happened here because you're that type of person that just needs to know that you know something. But you're not going to be able to remember anything about your future that we showed you, because that would take away your capacity for your own free will. You would be not able to choose except for what you thought was supposed to happen. So that was the last thing I was aware of until I was waking up in a recovery room and my husband and the kids were by my stretcher. And the thing that's very strange to explain to anyone is I felt as though I was operating with two different consciousness. One was my physical body's consciousness, and my brain was very much still under the effects of anesthesia. My physical body consciousness was trying to figure out what in the world had happened to me. I was looking down at a very bloated stomach, and I thought to myself, and I think even said to my husband, did I just have a baby? I could not remember that I had been there to have a back surgery. That's how befuddled my brain consciousness was. But at the same time, my spiritual consciousness that had just been through this near-death experience was recalling everything in complete and sharp relief, and in addition was filled with the same love and peace and bliss that I had experienced all during my near-death experience. I was filled with it as though I was in a protective bubble. And I just knew the truth of everything that I was remembering had just happened. So I was hospitalized first in ICU and then in another room, and I was in that hospital for 12 days. And during that time, a man came in, a doctor, to check on me, and as soon as I saw him, I realized that he was the man that in my NDE I had been told to pay close attention to.
That's right. Pay close attention to the healer back down on earth so that your body's revived and that you go back. See the diversion? She's all of a sudden saying, oh yeah, I remember that. This is the one they told me to pay attention to. It's nuts. I mean, how more blatant could it be?
Had been told to pay close attention to. He was the man that I saw that said, I've got to get in there fast. So after I was released from the hospital and had to go for a follow-up visit with this doctor to get staples removed from my abdomen, I had made up my mind that I was going to find out about what I had seen during my near-death experience and get him to respond to me. So at the appointment, I told him what I had seen when I had my experience and told him about how he was dressed and what he looked like and what happened, and asked him, is that what happened? And he responded back to me, how could you know that? And told me that he had been in his office seeing patients and had been paged to the hospital to try to save someone who had had a major artery cut and was bleeding, had bled out on the operating room table. And that, yes, that was how he was dressed. Yes, that was why I had seen him dressed like he was. So that is my experience, and that was my proof that I needed. The reality of it was so much more intense than what we all experience in everyday life. Like, for example, in terms of talking about the colors and about just the sensations of unbelievable, unconditional love and peace. The only thing I've said is, in the Bible, they call it the peace that passes all understanding. And it really does. You just can't express it. It's so intense and so indescribable.
It's so intense and so indescribable. We see this with NDEers where they just break down during certain moments of what they're talking about in their experience, right? Very common. It's like they're and they say this themselves. It's like they're reliving that specific moment or whatever part of the experience that they're talking about. They're reliving it in that moment when they're being interviewed, right? So just look at her face, right? This is the face of how, I mean, let's just call it what it is. This is the face of how powerful this experience is, right? This is what we're dealing with, right? The gloves are off. The gloves are off. This is the level of deception and manipulation we're dealing with. Not Karen. Has nothing to do with Karen. Nothing. It has everything to do with the mechanics of the matrix system itself in an effort to get us reincarnated and memory wipe us. This is it, right? I don't fault Karen. I don't fault any NDEer or any experiencer out there who has gone through this. I have much love and compassion for each and every one of them. At the same time, there just has to be a common sense approach as to what's happening here versus what's being represented in the astral, right? In the afterlife. That's the bottom line. And, some can say, oh, well, you're not meant to know everything. Well, you know what? I am meant to know everything. I am meant to know what the hell is going on here, where I am, what I'm involved with. And should I be making rash decisions like going to the light? Should I be making rash decisions to interact with anything after I leave here when I just came from here completely clouded in judgment, in discernment? See, this is why there's only one solution. I'm no guru, right? But the solution seems very, very evident for each of us, or at least those who see kind of what's going on here, right? The solution is non-interference, sovereignty, liberation. The creating of our own realm, basically isolating ourselves, not fully for the rest of eternity. Because I know some people are like, oh, well, Steve, what do you say? I don't want to be stuck in my own realm all alone for eternity. No, I never have said that. But for some reason, that narrative is just put out there. I mean, or at least perceived. And, I understand. Like, people come across these videos at different times, right? But I've never once said that we should all just be quarantined for the rest of eternity into our own realm, and do absolutely nothing. Hell no. That's not realistic, right? It only makes sense that we're going to want to eventually go exploring again, go interact again. But that doesn't mean that we have to interact within this bonkers clown world realm. See? And if we're all wrong, if we're all sitting here saying, oh, the light is right and justice and right and just and blah, 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 then you know what? We'll find out. But the point I'm trying to make to everyone listening who is new or otherwise on the fence about this, why take a chance? Why? If it's so loving and understanding and compassionate and empathetic and blah, 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 if all this stuff is what it's cracked up to be, then it can wait. it's clearly going to understand that you're not going to want to make any rash decision because it loves you. Right? See, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where those who listen to my content will clearly get what I'm saying, and those who want to make excuses and say, oh, I'll just go to the light and everything's fine. I'll take my chances. Well, you know what? Good luck. Good luck. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't know. But what I do know is that there's one solution, and that's a sovereign mindset. That's it. That's it. There's no other solution. Because it seems that anything outside of this can be easily manipulated. And we see this time and time and time again in all these experiencer cases. It's the same thing over and over and over again. So it's up to us to break that cycle as an individual and do what we need to do for us. Okay? That's it. That's it. There's one answer. Non-interference, sovereignty, liberation. Nothing more, nothing less. And if we're all wrong, well, we can get together and sing Kumbaya later at the light. Okay? Okay?
But I try to describe, but also when I tell about my near-death experience, in many ways, I'm re-experiencing it again each time I tell it. So therefore, some of the emotion and some of the feelings at a lower level kind of flow in, whether I like it or not, because I'm just reliving it. A lot of us who've had near-death experiences call it's like a homesickness, in terms of that is home. What I experienced there is home. And at a level that is beyond what we think of when we think of home here in this life. And so, yeah, many people do go through a period of time of deep homesickness and wanting to be back there. So it can be challenging.
You know what that's called? You know what the look, let's just call it what it is. We've all been drug addicts for the light. Okay? When you hear the description from these experiencers over and over and over again, right? What do you hear? It's like a drug addict seeking their next fix. Like, and it makes sense. I mean, I look at my journey and how I was seeking and seeking and seeking and seeking and then went down the, the new age path and stuff like that. It becomes clear that yes, we want love, right? I mean, it's common sense too, right? You want love, you want acceptance, you want compassion, you want empathy, you want all those things. But it's like there's something missing. And we're all like little drug addicts running around trying to find the answer. But we've been memory wiped. Okay? That's the difference. And then when it happens, either at death, at the time of death, or through something like an NDE or some other experience that has the love bomb type qualities, we've rediscovered it. Or they've rediscovered it, like the experience here we're talking about tonight with Karen, right? That has been rediscovered. Whether experienced or not, it's something that we're seeking for. And then you can even go a step further and look at the programming of the human body, right? A child wants to be loved. A child needs to be loved and accepted and taken care of and nurtured, right? By the mother, by the father, by the family, by the friends, whoever, right? The grandparents. That is necessary. So it really, I mean, just looking at the flow of ourselves as adults, but also like how everything works out is in childhood or infants, as we're infants, and our reliance upon adults to take care of us and love us and care for us. It goes deep. This whole thing goes really deep. And it's all based upon our re-entry into the light to feed our addiction. It's a straight path right back into the same process. Rinse and repeat, memory wipe. Rinse and repeat, memory wipe. And on and on and on. Okay, I want to give a big thank you to AA for your very kind super sticker. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. It's good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Also wanted to give a big thank you to Bone Man again for so graciously donating 20 memberships today. That was very kind of you. Thank you. And then Lawrence sent a message, member 11 months. Appreciate you, Lawrence. Always good to see you. Says, when it love bombed me several years ago during an OBE, I was impressed. But it wasn't life-changing. I got over it rather quickly and moved on. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, the NDE part of things seems to be a lot more powerful. I'd love to hear more, Lawrence. Feel free to drop it in the chat. Curious, like, what led up to it and what was experienced. I mean, I talked about, I think, a stream or two back, like, with the Buddhist retreat I was on. I mean, it was like, I was on cloud 9 love bomb high for probably close to 10 days, almost 2 weeks, somewhere around there. And it was crazy. But that was, and I was doing a lot of Zen meditation and stuff like that. But, and then I had the opposite experience a few months later, where it was dark as shit. I mean, so that was like, whoa. It's like, whoa, I experienced, both ends of the spectrum, and they were very, very different. And so, I don't know, I'd love to hear more, Lawrence. Feel free to share it in the chat.
And I don't have something. Many people do go through a period of time of deep homesickness and wanting to be back there. So it can be challenging. And I don't have some of the psychic abilities that some people who have had near-death experiences have, but I do have strong intuition that I trust. And I also do communicate with spiritual guides, including the one that was within my near-death experience, through meditation. And the things that make it so different, besides the literal proof I had from the doctor, are that it's every bit as clear and detailed now, all of these years later, when I'm 73 instead of 32. And that just simply isn't certainly not how hallucinations are, and certainly not even like most memories. I haven't been in that hospital in all the years since. And if I were to go back there today, I would not remember how to get to the physical therapy department that I worked in. But everything else of the details of my experience, I remember so well, so very vividly. And also, this type of reality, the reality of my near-death experience, is not like a normal memory or a hallucination, in that it has changed my entire life. It has made what I believe and how I live my life entirely different than what it was before the experience happened to me.
All All right, so what I'm going to do is take a 5-minute break, and we'll be right back. So sit tight, take a stretch break, do what you got to do, and we'll see each other momentarily. Much love, and be right with you.